What is going on, everybody? Wow, my voice just like cracked. What's happening, everybody? My name is Ian Robinson. I'm a ZBrush trainer here at Maxon, and we are going to be having some fun today because we're going to be going over a bunch of really cool stuff about said lightsaber that is here on my screen. Let me just go ahead and just get some music started in the background because I like to work with that. But yeah, hopefully everyone is doing well. Hopefully everything is good. So as you can see here, we're now in April, which means I wanted to start on some of my May the 4th stuff coming up. I try to get like a little bit ahead when it comes to that stuff. So I wanted to showcase this lightsaber that I was working on. It's Luke Skywalker's lightsaber from Return of the Jedi. I don't think it's a true one-to-one replica, but it's pretty close. It was just more of like something I wanted to build, and then I thought, hey, we could actually do a little stream about it. And some people were asking how I've done it, so it was all built in ZBrush. So you can actually see here that this was all, well, I mean, we'll build it together. It'll be fun. So we're gonna build a lightsaber together, and it'll be really, really cool. So I'm actually gonna go ahead and I could just show down the quick breakdown real fast, which I actually went through and actually named everything as I could. Hey, what's up, Randy? How you doing? Welcome in, welcome in. So I have all these different parts. When I do hard modeling in ZBrush, I actually work in sections, and then I'll join together later if required. So let's actually kick everything to a low, because everything has subdivisions, which is really, really cool. So you can see here, really low, and then I just subdivide it up a little bit. So really pretty straightforward. So I thought, yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. Let's do a little bit of a fun lightsaber action-y build today. So, and then real quick too, just want to showcase the renders that I got. This is the render I got in ZBrush. And there was a few little tricks that I had done to actually make this pop a little bit with the current version of Redshift and ZBrush. So if there's time, I can go over a couple of my settings, but I thought let's just get into the build. It would be really cool. Hey, what's up, Fury? Hey, maybe off topic, but would you say that the Marvelous Designer is mandatory nowadays for character production? I would say Marvelous Designer is definitely an industry standard. I myself don't utilize Marvelous Designer, but I teach ZBrush, and I focus on the character sculpting aspect of the work. So I personally don't use it a whole lot, but I've been looking into it personally to see about like how I could utilize it, just because it's really well done. But yeah, I would say it does not hurt taking a look at it, for sure. Hand pink waving, that's how I see it, Lord. What's going on? Okay, cool. So enough rambling. Let's actually go through. Oh, I wanted to showcase a close-up real fast. That was this one. Let me showcase a quick close-up render so you can see how it looks like such. So yeah, really, really cool. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. So some hard surface lightsaber build action today. Everything was done in ZBrush, including the renders, so there's a lot of potential. What I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to go ahead and dock this, like get like a stamp of this so we have our reference on screen. So, and I'm going to go ahead and hide down this blade. We don't actually need the blade itself in the main build. Building the blade was really simple. Literally took like 10 seconds. So let's do something like that, and I'm going to go ahead and Shift S to stamp that over, and then I'm going to start a brand new project. So we got this guy right here. Perfect. I'm going to turn perspective off, and now we have this, and we're going to make Polymesh 3D, and now we got this guy right here. So I'm actually going to be working basically from the top down, but what I like to do first before anything else is my throwaway subtool, as I call it. It's basically the subtool that is the naming convention. I'm just going to go ahead and size this to a size that looks close to the lightsaber. So I'm just literally going to scale this up. And this will be my kind of reference. So I'm going to basically scale upwards until it's close to like the handle size-ish. And also the same height. So if I do something like this, boom. That will be pretty close. So this will be about the size that I'm going to want the lightsaber. So for sizing, that's going to help me out. And I'm even going to do myself a little favor, and I'm going to go to my edge loop and delete loops. And now that's just getting rid of all the unnecessary loops. Let's go ahead and do a save as, and we're going to do this lightsaber build stream. 001. And I can't spell build today. I can't spell. You guys know me by now. I don't spell well. Hey, what's up, Don? How you doing? Snickles, what's happening? All right. So, of course, too, if you guys have any questions, this is open forum, so please ask all of your awesome, amazing questions. And let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, and we're going to focus on this top part here. And honestly, like, it's pretty straightforward, which I love about ZModeler. So we're going to get into a lot of ZModeler action. So I masked off this, I'm going to mask off this top section. And then I'm just going to go ahead and kind of scale this down just a little bit. So we're going to focus on the blade aspect. I'm going to zoom in because now we can't see anything. And what I would like to do here is really just focus on the ZModeler function. So I'm going to go BZM. And if you're working in hard surface, again, it's important to know that you don't have to focus everything as being connected. None of this is connected. Only certain sections are. So, and then we can merge the rest later, which helps too with renders and different materials and so forth. So I'm actually going to go with polygroups, and I'm going to go ahead and do a group by normal, which is going to give me my different polygroups. This way I could come in here and do something like inset, polygroup all, come in here and select just this guy, tapping alt to give me different polygroups. And then I actually want this inner portion to be a little bit longer. So I'm going to be making some changes here to my design just a little bit. We're going to make this part really thin. Hey, sorry to ask. Never apologize to ask. Never apologize to ask. That's what we're here for. But I emailed you a couple times about the summit. Yes, Don. So I have your email, and I've sent it forward to the prospect. So I will try to follow up with it as much as possible. I did see it, and then I did send it forward and asked. If you can give us a little bit of time just to go through, please, that'd be great. And I do highly appreciate your patience with that. Henry, what's up? Is it possible to do interior lighting in ZBrush? It is now with Redshift, yes, absolutely. Going back to this render here, not that one, but going with this one, boom. So all this was done in ZBrush. You're absolutely welcome, Don. All this is done in ZBrush. 2 lighting sources, light this lightsaber, as well as some BPR filters on top of it to bring in some of the ambient occlusion that I need, as well as some of the blur effect to get the nice lighting. So yes, it is possible now in ZBrush to get some interior lighting and emissive effects. Absolutely. Which is actually one of the reasons why we put Redshift in ZBrush, was to help bring all of that to life. Makes it easier for you as the artist to definitely come in and start creating in a way that's a little bit easier and a little bit more time consuming. I mean, sorry, not time consuming, a little bit easier and less time consuming. Jeez, can't speak. So that way you're actually able to just kind of focus on the design elements. And then when you're ready to really go final render status and you need to navigate to your final DCC for that, you already have an idea of what that looks like, which is nice. Okay, so I'm going to come through here. I'm going to Alt-Tab again. And again, I'm just focusing on this top part here. And I'm just going to come through here. And I'm just using QMesh and then Inset. And then I'm doing a mask reverse and dragging this out. So mask reverse is as you drag out your mask, holding Control, press and hold Alt. That does a mask reverse. And then I'm going to I'm navigating with the gizmo. Yeah, absolutely. What's up, Spear? How you doing, Spear Chuck? Cool. All right. And then, so you can already see we already got our final steps in here. And at the end of this stream, I basically have decided that you guys will be able to make this lightsaber just by following along. So the steps, what's cool about hard surface and ZBrush, and this is just my opinion on the matter, is that it's almost repetitive in a positive way. I don't need to do a whole lot of crazy tricks in order to get something that I really, really want or need. What's cool is that I'm able to just do a few handful of tricks and repeat that process a bunch of times, and then I can focus on getting something like this. And it's already starting to take shape, and I didn't have to really know much more than just hovering over here, clicking Inset, Polygroup All, utilizing those polygroups. Now on this lightsaber, I'm pointing to my screen like you can see it. On this lightsaber, I actually had a very narrow a narrow opening for the blade itself. And I'm actually going to make a slight change to that. And I think I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. I don't know. Let's look at something real fast. If we go here, boom, boom. Let me pull up some reference. It's hard to see, actually. It's almost like it's funny is that some of the lightsabers, like I have a bunch of reference here, looks like it's a lot wider. I actually made that, yeah. So it's almost like it doesn't even really exist in that wide hilt. So I'm going to make a small little change to that. Hey, what's up, Oliver? It's good to see you too. Welcome in, welcome in. We're making a lightsaber in ZBrush today. So what we're going to do is, now this is the slightly tricky part with this, is that I need this to be relatively the same width as this area. So what I'm going to do is just kind of just come through and make sure I'm not exceeding this. We don't need to go like super far down, but what we could do to give us a little bit more TLC here is that I can actually come through with QMesh. Again, QMesh is not an extrusion per se. It's ZBrush's way of actually, you can see I'm pushing through that area. It's ZBrush's way of actually moving geometry and then utilizing edge snapping to create custom designs with our poly groups. So it's a really awesome way to help things snap. And what I mean by that is, like, let's say if I wanted this group to snap to this edge here, this is what QMesh is known for. Take QMesh, come through here, and you can see here it snaps to that area. So I can create custom designs and snap to specific edge loops. Or two, what's neat about it is that I can actually create holes, which you'll see in a second how I do that. So we're actually going to come through and let's push. Yeah, so this will actually be the new opening. So a slight change to the original design that I did. But we're going to come through and QMesh this again and bring this down. So this will be the opening of the blade. Perfect. Now there's on the one I built, I also added these little holes here at the top. I can't remember where I saw this actually. I always thought of these as vents, so I want to repeat that as well. But I'm going to repeat that this time on the inside here. And then what I'm going to do with this loop here is actually go to slide complete edge loop, and I'm going to fan this out a little bit. So it's not just straight up and down. And then in here, let's go to insert multiple edge loops with keep groups. What's cool about this is that I can drag out multiple loops, or I can just have one and it's perfectly snapped in the middle, which is perfect because now I'm going to come up here to transform, activate symmetry. And what we want to do is we want to work on the y-axis because we want to have radial symmetry coming around. So I'm going to go Y with radial symmetry. And you can see here now I have radial symmetry. So I could come on this point here. Let's actually come on this point. And then I'm going to do split. And this is going to create a little bit of a hole. And I'm going to create two so that I have some nice support. So I'm going to create one here. And then I'm going to create another one on the inside like that. That way I can hover over here, QMesh, and I can push this down a little bit, push this down, giving me some edge loops. So now if I were to go ahead and smooth, or like do a smooth dynamic, I get perfect holes there. But you can see I'm not getting perfect edging here. So I can either do myself a favor and do the ZBrush trick, which is crease by polygroups. And then when I go ahead and do dynamic smoothing, I get nice and sharp fall off. So we've already created like the top portion of the lightsaber like that. Ah, join the dark side. I know, right? Hey, what's up, Johnny? See a modeler, neat, cool. I have, hey, what's up, Masafu? How you doing? I have to go. I have another stream that's relevant to people that didn't jump on the. Okay. Yeah, of course, man. Absolutely. Absolutely, man. And again, if you got questions, let me know. Okay, we're going to come through here, mask this section off. And we're going to move this up just a little bit, kind of matching the original design. So you can see here, we're already going on. Nice. Now we're going to create the second part. So now the second part is like copper. So it's not the same metal material as let's say this top part would be. So I'm going to break away from this section, and I'm going to rename this. It's not really a hilt. It's not. We'll just call it top of saber. Really original naming, Ian. Good job. Wait, what's up, Chris? Awesome. I'm glad you're doing well, man. That's good, Maso. Yeah. All right. So we got superior naming conventions. The trick isn't to name it correctly. The trick is to name it so you know what you're looking at when you go back in time. Yeah. Pivot point is automatically moved how? So you want to move a pivot point. So it's all tied to the gizmo. There's a couple tricks you can utilize from that. So I'm going to turn off my radial symmetry so I stay in the center. So the gizmo pivot point can be controlled by doing Alt and tapping on a vertice, or just holding Alt and recentering your gizmo. So if I wanted to, let's say, come on down here to the bottom, you can also do it by masking, which I do a lot. I will mask off an area or reverse mask it, and then send that gizmo to the bottom here. So now I can pivot this way back and forth. Or if I want to pivot up here from the very top, again, I can mask off this section, inverse it, send it to the top, clear it, and now I'm pivoting this way. So you can pivot however the gizmo is facing. But if you are looking at your model, another way to navigate in your scene is actually to do the right-click method, which a certain Mr. Paul Gabry had converted me over not too long ago to almost full-time right-click, is that I can now, wherever I click on that point, I'm actually right-clicking, I'm hovering over, I'm not clicking on the actual tablet, I'm actually hovering over that point, and then I'm right-clicking from that point. And that changes my pivot point from the point that it's recognizing. So as I'm rotating around, it's rotating from this section. But if I come over here and right-click, I'm now pivoting from that section. So you can either pivot your viewpoint by right-clicking in that scene, because wherever you click, even if I'm out here in space, that's where it's pivoting from. Or you can utilize the gizmo itself to actually move your point in space by rotating your model. You're truly rotating your model, not just in the actual space itself. So the pivot point could be controlled in two different ways. However, most of us will not be moving our model around in space via the gizmo unless you're actually trying to make a change. But if you're right-clicking, wherever you right-click, that is going to be your new pivot point. Just finishing lunch? Nice. Seems like a silly question, but is it possible to use ZModeler to fix topo issues in ZBrush model? Short answer, absolutely, 100%. I could take a ZBrush mesh and make it good for animation, but yes, so absolutely, you 100% can do that. In fact, there's a couple settings you'll want to utilize, or just come up to the light box, go to Brush, and then go to ZModeler, double-click it, and there is a special retopology ZModeler version of the ZModeler. So the difference is, I'm not going to double click that, I'm just going to show you. The difference is if you hover over a point, you actually have it set to move with snap to surface. And then if I hover over an edge, I have this set to extrude with snap to surface. And then over a face, it's typically set to do nothing. And then this would be your ZModeler. This is your ZModeler setup for retopology. And it's that snap to surface that's super important. So to answer your question, if I take the sphere here, yay, this is a super beautiful Dynamesh sphere. And then I want to come through, I want to just duplicate it for funsies, solo mode it out. And then let's say I'm going to let's actually do, this is my favorite way to do any type of ZModeler or using ZBrush for retopology, is to have some polygroups selected, symmetry turned on if your model is truly symmetrical, going to geometry, and then I'm going to go to ZBrush, adapt, keep groups, smooth that down to 0, adaptive size down to 0. This actually tells ZBrush to have even, clean quads as much as possible, but still adapting to the mesh. I'm going to go ahead and remesh that, and I'm going to do that a couple times. Okay. Now let's assume, just for the sake of funds, that we have an error right here. What you can do now is with those ZModeler changes, just come through and actually take the face and do a delete. So right there. And I actually hover over this spot here, delete those faces you want to get rid of. And then you can actually come through, hover over this edge, extrude out, and then start welding those points together. You can even come through and go to bridge and then say 2 edges and actually start bridging those points together. And then of course too, you can clean that out. And if you have surface that's underlining, it's actually going to help snap to that surface a little bit better. You can also say, like, let's say I don't want this quad here, or this is a triangle and it's actually impeding on my loop. I can hover over the point and go to stitch, and then I can say this point and this point, I want to merge those two together. So like this is the error that I have, right? So let's say this is the error I want to fix. Now I come over and I delete those edges. I come out and I actually extrude this point here, and then I actually come through with that move. And again, that snap to surface would help me if there's an underlying surface coming through and actually cleaning up this the topology. So there you go. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a relax smooth to bring that surface back. And I just rebuilt it. So absolutely you can. ZModeler is really good for that. You are so welcome. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Slimin', I'll have to play with that. Always do my retopple elsewhere. No, 100%. Also, too, I mean, this is something that I've been working on kind of like for my own personal use. How can I make retopology faster in ZBrush? Let me show you, too, a brush that I think got a lot of love a few years back, and then all of a sudden, like, it just kind of fell off the planet, and that is the actual Topo brush, Topology brush. Now, if I have a model here that I actually would like to come through and like actually retopologize, what I can do is actually use this topology brush to start creating these quads, right? And so from here, I can actually go ahead and alt tap and create new mesh. Now, you see here that I actually have some sort of thickness to this. I don't want that thickness. So I actually will set my brush size down to 1. If I go ahead and alt tap again, you might notice that it kind of like disappeared a little bit. But you can see here, I actually have single-sided geometry. So I'm going to back that up again. And I can actually clear those quads out by alt sliding my mesh this way. There we go. I'm like dragging too many things. Okay, alt slide that, grab 0, boom. Actually, 1 is the way to go. So all the way down. There we go. Tap that. And then again, I went ahead and now I have this topology, the single-sided topology. So from here, what I can do is actually split hidden, right? So now I have this mesh here. I could inflate this just a little bit, just so I could see what's going on the other surface, or I can actually do transparency mode. And now with that ZModeler brush, okay, with the snap to surface extrude, I now can start dragging through. I can even press and hold Alt and drag out multiple ones, or I can press and hold Alt and drag out in bulk here. So with symmetry turned on, tap Alt again, I can actually come through here and actually start making changes, right? So here's my independent, and it's snapping to that surface. So I can get these quads out really quickly. So you could, in theory, use the topology brush to get you started on that surface. But then as well, there's also rows that you can go ahead and utilize as well. So I can actually say num of rows, and I could drag this out and give me 5. And again, it's snapping to the surface. This is like, in my opinion, this is super underrated because I can come through here and actually start coming in and drawing out these different sections. And again, it's snapping to that surface here. And then I can switch back and forth to single row, and I can either pull this out and do this connection, or I could come here to bridge, and I can say bridge these points together. Boom, boom, boom. Right? So this is a super simple example, but it's, in my opinion, it's just taking this, moving this around, and adjusting all the stuff. You can get something really quickly, fast. And again, it all started here with it just started here with the actual sphere and then the topology brush. So I was able to manipulate that really, really quickly. So again, that's just coming down here, grabbing the topology brush. And again, you could turn on lazy mouse as well. So I can come up here, go to lazy mouse, turn this on, and get really nice, clean topology. I recommend when using the topology brush to actually use a smaller brush size. But let's just say like this is the flow of my mesh. This is what I would want. I'm going to come through here and I'm going to start dragging out all these quads. And you can see here, it's actually coming through. And you can continue a line too. If you hover over, if you get really close, actually click, you can continue a line. So you can drag all of this out. So if you're like me, a little bit more visual, you could start retopoing just like this. This could be the starting of your retopo process as well. So there's a lot of ways to start that. Then alt drag, and then of course just tap and get that mesh. And even if you do get the mesh where it's double-sided geometry, like you're like dropping it down to that 0 point, what you could even do is instead of fighting with the brush and saying like, okay, I need that down at 0 and I need that tap, and maybe it's not giving you exactly what you want, that's okay. Let's say we do have some thickness like this. Just go ahead and split unmasked. Go down here and actually just, it's polygrouped for you. So you could literally just drag that mesh there, or just come in here, grab this one on the inside. Go ahead and go to geometry, modify topology, and delete hidden. And now just go down to display properties and flip your normals. And now your normals are faced the correct way. And you have really nice even quads. So lots of ways to do it. Sorry, you've been grubbing the last few streams, and not mad at you or Paul or the public faces. Really appreciate you. Hey, don't. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. You're totally fine. Thank you so much for saying that. I do appreciate that. And awesome question, by the way. So hopefully that answers a lot of what you were going for. And is there a mirror instance you can sculpt on the original mesh and isolate viewport, and then see updates on both instances in the other viewport? Like, are you talking about like multi-monitor? Or are you talking about split screen? There is a split screen function, but I will be honest, I don't know it as well as I should. That might be what you're asking for. So we have a video on split screen that I can throw it to you, but I don't think that's what you're asking. I think you're talking about multi-monitor. And if that's the case, there is no multi-monitor currently. However, let me send you an Ask ZBrush on split screen and see if that's what you're asking for as well. So I'm going to go ahead and send that in the chat. I just don't use split screen that often. It's not a part of my workflow mainly, but I know we do have a split screen. But if I'm reading the question correctly, I don't think that's what you're asking for. I think you're asking for multi-monitor. So if you can actually call and let me know if my assumption is correct. If not, I can try to see if what else, like how to answer that question. Okay, very cool. So let's go ahead and pop on back while I'm waiting for Colin to go ahead and continue our lightsaber build. And again, hopefully that topology question was helpful, because honestly, like, I am developing workflows myself to utilize the topology brush with the Z modeler brush to retopo quickly, because honestly I think I could do it faster than moving out of ZBrush. It's my personal opinion. Please, no one shoot me. All right, let's go ahead and go through it. So now we got our main top part here. Let's go ahead and let's create the secondary spot, which I'm going to turn this guy on again. Here, boom. So this is going to help kind of keep us in check with our height and make sure that we are achieving our goals, at least in the length aspect. So we're going to go ahead and create this copper piece next. So I'm actually going to go ahead and grab this. I'm going to Control-Shift-D, which duplicates our mesh or folder selected. And now I'm going to go ahead and actually scale this on down. I'm going to bring this on up here into space and now intersect this. So I'm going to go ahead and do this right here. Boom. I'm going to send this in there like that. Boom. Just like that. Okay. So this is already kind of what we're going for, right? Which is really, really fun. So now we can do one of two ways. We can either extrude this out by coming through here and sizing this up. And then I can either control drag a new edge loop and drag this out and then position it this way. And then go ahead and control drag again, which will give me this shape here. That's one way of doing it, and why I like that method is even though I have this little bevel here, I want this edge to be perfectly straight. This is the power of clip curve. Clip curve will actually take a part of your mesh, right, and it will push it to the surface completely. But I can mask this section off. I can come through here, and I can just clip that section underneath it, protecting my outer, and now that's a perfectly flat edge because it just took everything above it except for what was masked, and underneath I clipped, and that just shoved that geometry perfectly flat. So that's another great way of doing that. Or we could have just done the same old, which is we inserted, we used inset, got a different polygroup, extruded or Q-meshed it out. Same method, but different result. And now we have this piece here, and we're already about a third of the way of building this lightsaber. So I'm going to call this copper tubing, and that's going to help me understand what material this is associated with as well. All right. Now let's move on to the next portion. Now the next portion is almost the exact same thing, just reversed with a couple extra steps. So I'm going to Control-Shift-D, and I'm going to name this, what should I name that? It doesn't really matter, does it? Metal tubing. The metal tube. And now I'm going to go ahead and, because the pivot point is sent here in the center, I'm just going to go ahead, unmask that. I'm going to rotate that bad boy around 180 degrees because that was in the center, so that works out. And then I'm actually going to scale this part up, and then I'm going to mask this section and bring this down like that. Now, what is kind of interesting is that we do have the good length. Now I can either come through and actually work from the underside, or I can actually do myself a favor and work just from the top side. So I'm actually going to have this part be the bottom. So I'm going to scale it down just a little bit more. Set that here. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And I can either now drag this out with an edge loop, just like such, or we can go back to the... Actually, let's do that. Let's do that drag out first, because I'm going to show you something here in a second, which is actually going to help us out. It's really simple, just polygroups, group by normals. But here now I'm going to take the Z modeler brush, hover over an edge, and go polygroup, and I'm going to press and hold and give me a new polygroup on the complete edge loop. Hover over here, Q mesh, and just drag that shape out. Tapping Alt to give me another polygroup. Donezo. So really, we already have the top part of the lightsaber pretty well in place. And if I line that up, that's actually pretty close to the size that we wanted, which is awesome. So now I'm going to go ahead. Let's do ourselves a favor. Let's click Save. And you know what? I'm even going to create a project. So maybe I'll create a time lapse of this build. So I'm going to go to File. I'm going to click Undo History. Go ahead and Save As. And then I'm going to call this live stream saber build with history. Naming conventions, for me, they are a lifesaver. All right. Now this next part is going to be really, really fun. We can approach this part in a lot of different ways, depending on how we decide to go about doing that. We can either really be tedious, or we can kind of shortcut it by making one and then utilizing array mesh to do the actual aspect. I originally made this as one piece. So if I actually come here and go to Alt tap this piece, and let's just solo that out. Might be a little hard to see because I actually have redshift materials on there, so I'm going to turn those off. I actually made this all as one piece from a super low topology, which wasn't super hard to do. So let's start with that. Let's go there. Let's do that. So let's come in here and let's grab this piece. Okay, I have this soloed out, which is great. I'm actually going to turn transparency off. And then I did name that metal tubing. So now I'm actually going to take this guy again, Control-Shift-D, send this down to the bottom. And now we're going to go ahead and start scaling this down. And again, we can actually come through here and get something that is close to correct. Smooth this up. Something like such. I'm actually going to go ahead and mask that section off, send that back up here, and then just invert that by control tapping and then dragging that up. Or I can use the scaling function and drag that up too. I'm actually going to want that to intersect just a little bit. So there we go. Sorry, my question didn't really make sense. Specifically talking about create instance subtool. Can I mirror the instance as well as translate it? Oh yeah, you can. Yes, you can mirror the instance. Absolutely. Oh, there's okay. All right. I think I understand what you're saying now. Yes, you can mirror the instance. There's a couple of ways you can go about doing that. So for example, go ahead and just save this real fast. So for example, let's go back here to our handy dandy remeshing tool here. And yes, so first off is I'm working in symmetry, but let's pretend I wasn't. And there's nothing wrong with that. So now I have this guy here. I'm going to go ahead and delete hidden. So geometry, modify topology, and delete hidden. So now I have this mesh here. So there's a couple ways that you can mirror. The most common way that myself and a lot of artists use is mirror and weld, which will mirror the instance of your, will mirror it automatically over from screen left to screen right. And then that's gonna, the mirror and weld aspect is also too because you can weld geometry together. What I mean by that is if I have this section masked off, let's come through here. Let's use our Z modeler brush with our edge loop, and then I'm gonna just go ahead and extrude this all the way over on this side. So if you cross the threshold of the center line and I do mirror and weld, it's not only going to mirror my object, but it's also going to weld that together, creating a perfect edge loop down the middle of my mesh. So this is actually a really great way if you are working on one side to actually quickly move topology and get things welded in by just pushing that over, mirror and weld, and then that gives you that aspect. But if you just want to mirror an instance, then like let's say we actually have this on the opposite side, you go to deformation, and you can mirror the instance just by clicking mirror, but you can also mirror on X, Y, or Z axis. So you're able to mirror back and forth. Another trick, though, with mirror and weld that I don't think a lot of people know is that mirror and weld by default will be always looking, again, from screen right to screen left. So it's always going to be pointing in that direction. However, if nothing, and I mean if nothing resides over on this side of the mesh, or on the space, sorry, not the mesh, the space, there's absolutely nothing here. You're completely empty on this side because you worked on screen right. Mirror and weld also will work in the reverse. So I just got it back on the other side. So you don't have to mirror back the mirror and weld. Again, that only means, though, if there's nothing on this side. If you have something on this side, even just a little bit, like this one vertex is literally hovering that side, and then I do a mirror and weld, it's only going to mirror and weld that one vertex. So just be careful of that. So if you are using mirror and weld and you're like, man, I'm on the wrong side, and then you do this and that happens, that's because there is something that's actually on the right side and it detects this side first. But if there's nothing there and you hit mirror and weld, it will automatically pop that over too. So you'll be able to mirror your any part of your mesh from one side to the other, either by using mirror or mirror and weld to do those axes. No, it's set by default. It is set by default to always look on this side first and then populate that. Okay, very cool. Well, I could definitely note that down, Neon, which I will do. But yeah, it's been this way for a while, absolutely. Here, I'm actually going to make a note to maybe... I'm just going to make a quick note. Never hurts. Never hurts to ask. Okay. Very cool. Okay, cool. Very, very good. All right, let's actually move on forward. Hopefully that answered your question, but yeah, that's how you can do the mirroring aspect. And also, too, don't forget, under Z plugin, you do have Subtool Master, which has a bunch of different tools and features that you can actually populate and grab, and there's a mirror function there. So you can actually mirror as well completely from which axis you're choosing on this side of things. So with the mirror and with the mirror deformation mirror, you could choose accessing from this side, or you just go up to Z plugin, Subtool Master, and you get this menu here. And there's a couple artists that actually utilize this menu well, and this gives you a lot of really cool shortcuts quickly. So you can copy, clone a folder, you can actually do mirroring, and then when you choose mirror, this would actually say, hey, I want to merge into one subtool and mirror it, or I want to append on different subtools. And what that would actually do is, let's say I had this guy here. I'm going to go ahead and let's actually do it from this side just to be fun. Geometry, modify topology, and delete hidden. Now, if I want to go ahead and mirror this over, but I actually want to mirror it and make it a secondary subtool, coming up here and choosing the mirror and saying append as a new subtool, when I say OK, it's going to go ahead and mirror that object. But if I hit solo mode, this was the original, this is now the secondary, it made it a new subtool for me, so then I can work on that as well independently, or I can just join them together. Yep. My monitor right now, so I have a 32-inch monitor, and my resolution is set by 1920 by 1080. I don't actually, no, I lied to you. It's actually 2122 by 1280. I don't go much higher than this though when I'm working, because a lot of times when I do any type of like redshift rendering, the higher this is, the more there is to actually render. So if you actually wanted to get a really good render out of ZBrush, you'd actually up that number. But typically I will be working in this or half of this even. But by default, this is my setting. So yeah, 2122 by 1280. So just slightly above 1080. Great questions, guys. Great questions. Okay, we're going to pop back in here, and we're going to continue this section right here. Hello, what's up, Emperor of Cheese? How you doing? All right, all right. So we're going to come through, and now we're going to make this section here. So I'm actually going to, real quick, I'm going to add in something. I want to come through here, and I want to say, on this edge, I want to insert single here. I want to see something. I had this idea in my head. Oh my god. Let me see something. Alt this. Okay, very cool. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to come through here, and I'm actually going to, I'm thinking actually to make this as easy as possible, because I can always weld these things together, is I'm going to make one. So I'm going to attack this a little bit differently than I did this. So I'm actually going to make the one, because especially if we're doing any type of concept design, we don't want to spend days moving a lot of edge loops back and forth, back and forth. I actually just want to make, you know, one, and then I want to duplicate it. So I'm going to come through with multiple edge loops, and I'm actually going to drag out so I have these two here. And then just with a normal masking tool, I'm going to mask and I'm going to reverse mask these two edge loops. So then I can actually come through here and actually scale this out just like that. Now with the poly group, we're going to come in, we're going to go poly group, and I'm going to make this its own poly group. I'm going to make this one its own poly group, and I'm going to make this one its own poly group. So I could have gone all the way down here to do, you know, group by normals, but I chose to do it this way. Absolutely no real wrong way to do it. There's just 100 ways to go through everything. Oh, I have a question. Is it possible to fix the scale of something? Not like you could scale, but like export scale. It gets set to crazy numbers when you export, blah, 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 blah. Yes, absolutely. Default object first. Okay, so let me finish this thought, and then let's talk about scaling for a little bit. Because yes, there is absolutely a way to adjust that. So now what I want to do here is I actually want to come through and multiply this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 times. I want to do this 12 times. So instead of coming through and trying to just like, you know, I could do this. I could just come through here and say like, that's what I want. But that's one of the faster ways to do it. And I absolutely could do that. Or I can actually control the exact spacing that I want by going to array mesh and turning on array mesh with transpose and lock position. And then I'm actually going to now offset this. I'm going to hit a repeat. So I'm going to repeat this 12 times. And then now I want to go ahead on the y-axis and I want to actually start sliding this out until I get something that I want. And what I mean by having complete control is that this is 10. What does 12 look like? What does 15 look like? That's way too much. What does 13 look like? So I can actually come through here. And now this is only 130 points, right? But I can now turn that on and off whenever I would like. So I can literally get this one nice and finished. And then I just have all of these points here that I was able to control. Any point in time, I can either turn this off or I can say make mesh, and that will make its own mesh at that point. And then I can either weld them all together if I choose to, or if it's just for like render, or if it's just going to get dynameshed anyway in the final for like any type of, or remesh by union for any type of 3D printing needs. It's an easy way to go ahead and go about that. So that's the other way that you could do that build session. The way I ended up doing this one originally, so I'm going to duplicate this to showcase how I did the first one. So I'm going to solo this out, and I'm going to turn array mesh off. This one was a little bit more tedious with the way that I did it. I'm going to back this up in time. Oh, I can't do that, actually. So I'm going to keep that one as array mesh because I duplicated it, so I don't have history on that. So I'm going to do this guy right here, say something like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and actually copy that one off. So the way I did this one, again, and let me turn on just to make it easier, but what I did was I actually came through here, masked off the bottom side, inverted that, then I came through like this, okay? And then I did a hand count originally. I was like, I don't know what I was thinking, but I came through here and I was like, okay, great, how many of these do I want? I want 12, so I'm gonna go to, insert, and then I'm gonna go ahead and I just drug out a bunch. And then I literally was just like, I want this one, and then I want this one, and then I came through here, and then I ended up scaling them out. This works fine, but this was the long method of doing that, and I don't recommend doing it that way. So don't be like me, do it the other way. Okay, so going to your other question, scaling. Scaling is super important, so I'm glad you brought it up. Boom. So what I'm going to do, we're going to keep that one actually. Where was this one? Solo it out. Let's go ahead and delete this one. Yay, perfect. Okay, so now we got this. Let me go ahead and hit save. So scaling. So let's say I'm going to merge visible here. So I will, just for the sake of funsies, go ahead and make a mesh on this. And then I'm going to go and merge visible. So I have this the one to work with. I'm going to control that back. Now I have this guy. So yeah, let's say your scene is ginormous, right? This is a massive, massive scene. In fact, I'm going to save out, and I'm going to go ahead and say test. Okay. So let's say I brought in something else too. Well, first off, the main thing to really focus on is that when you're doing any type of scaling, right, the thing is that under geometry, under size, right now, my overall size is set to 7. My X is set to 2. Y is 7, 2 size. I'm going to bring up another... What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up another... not that one. I'm going to bring this one up. I'm going to bring up another project for a second. Because this is the ideal project when it comes to rendering, when it comes to exporting out. I'm going to actually open up the earthquake project. So I'm going to say, yep, here he is, earthquake project. Oops, I hit the wrong button. Come through here, double tap it, say no, don't save anything. Okay, so here's my earthquake project, right? But if you come down here and look at the size is set to 2. This is actually a really good size for working and even setting scales and doing that sort of stuff. 2 is a good size. If you look at the majority of the actual projects that are default with ZBrush, like if I come up here to the dog, double click it, come on in, again, you'll notice that the size is 2. So how can we actually ensure that our sizing is correct when we're scaling stuff? So one of the ways that you can actually do that, so if I were to load in another project, so I'm just going to go ahead and control open. I'm going to load in my lightsaber redshift project. There's nothing wrong with working at a bigger size, but when it comes to like fitting things from one scene to another, this is something that you want to pay attention to. So you could, in theory, literally with a subtool, right, scale this whole thing up. And now that's scaling up that one subtool. That's all it's doing. It's scaling that up. And that one subtool is now here. And I could come through and say set to my 2. And that actually would be fine. But the last action doesn't actually work with the scaling of its size. So a way that I like to go about doing this is actually controlling that back. Is I actually control the sizing by going up here to Transpose Master. Okay, so I'm going to go up here, T-Pose Mesh. And the first thing I do when I come up here to Transpose Master is I'll go down to Deformation and I'll hit Unify. And I'll see what that does. Unify is going to take a look at your mesh and the overall scene based on this preview. And it's also going to take a look at the overall project and say like, okay, that's what it is. When I'm here, if I were to hit Deformation, so I'm going to shift, open this up and say Unify, it's now looking at this preview and it's saying that, well, this object fits this preview and then this is actually how big it should be. And if I were to actually go to my geometry and size, you'll notice that Unify has taken that one subtool and it's moved it up to 2, right? So it's easy to pop in here to our Transpose Master. Now I need to go back and actually fix that part there. And let's just resend that because I think I just broke the connection. So it's easy from here to come in and say, you know what? Okay, I want to actually come on up and I'm going to go ahead and do Deformation and Unify. Now if I come back here, again, this is now set to 2. You could also do a manual scaling up and down. And when you scale something, so when you drag something around, you bring it in your scene and then you scale it up, you're actually affecting the size. And that is going to affect when you import, export things out. So when you're coming through here and you want to actually set things up, it's a good idea to merge everything together, set it on over, do the deformation, and then come on through. I believe, so if I send this back, you can actually come through here. Now I believe Scale Master helps with this as well. So after I do this, blah, 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 we have here, boom. Now notice too, this is actually 1.8 is now based on that one subtool. So I could actually too, in other ways, I could just select everything and scale this up manually all together, and it's affecting everything. And now I might be able to, I've never done it this way. No, that doesn't work. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and actually set here, boom, 2. So now this is actually something that works out well. Now my scene set is set to 2, and this is good. And I just use the pizza box to scale everything up uniformly. I believe if I go to, let me do one other section real fast. So if I go to Scale Master, yeah, ZBrush Scale Unify, absolutely. You could click that, and it's going to go through and scale unify all of my objects based on the scene scale. Now, I didn't set scene scale, so it's making everything really, really tiny at the moment, right? So with ZBrush Scale Master, you would actually want to come up here, set scene scale, and say, yeah, I'm going to need this to be here. Okay, and then let's say I ended up setting this subtool, so I set scene scale on this subtool, and that's important too. What you set your scene scale on is going to need to depend on how ZBrush looks at your model. If I set scene scale to this guy, so if I go here and say set scene scale and I pick this, and then I look at this subtool next, and then I make major changes to this subtool, it was originally set to this subtool. So it's nice to have a control subtool. So sometimes what you'll see me do is either create a bounding box. So I'll say something like new bounding box subtool, which creates a bounding box based on your entire project. So you can actually see my lightsaber buried in there. This color is really bad to see. There we go. So you can see that my lightsaber is in that box. And because my lightsaber in space is physically not true symmetrically, it's actually set off yonder, it actually created a symmetrical bounding box based on my subtool's positioning. So I like to set scene scale with this box first, and then make my adjustments to this, saying like, I want this box to be, you know, 1 inch or 2 inches. So I'll go 22, oh my gosh, 25.4, 25.4. So I'll say 20, well, whatever, 25.4. That's 1 inch in millimeters. I'm not going to do, I hit the wrong button, don't mind me. So again, Y, 25.4. Take that, and then I'll do a resize subtool. So I'll resize everything, and now that's going to go ahead and reset that scene scale, right? So I know we weren't talking about necessarily sizing just the subtools or resizing the subtools, but it's all connected into itself. So it's important to cover all those aspects, because now when I come down here to geometry, notice that my sizing has now changed. So depending on how you're working and what you're working in, you're always going to be affecting the size of your model based on how you're setting up your scene, either be for 3D printing, manufacturing of any other kind, or a final render. So, and again, if you come up here to preferences, a lot of that lives here in the transpose units. So this is, every time you make a scale change, everything is being seen by ZBrush, especially with Scale Master, based on this transpose units up in the preferences. If you want to adjust this, again, you can either just select everything and then come on down here and scale this on down, and you're literally affecting your entire scene. Or once you set scene scale, you can actually then come up here and do a ZBrush scale unify, and it will reunify your scale based on everything that it's seeing and how the scene is being displayed. So there's a couple ways to go about doing that. Now for exporting issues that you might be experiencing is once you've set to your size, notice now my size is set to 1.96864, blah, blah. This is actually a really good size to kick over to Maya or to any other program, Blender, even Cinema 4D. It's good to like always focus on the scale side. But if you come down here to import export, you will have a scaling in import export as well. And adjusting this number to like, let's say 1, we'll look at that true size scale and then set it on that 1 ratio. So that will help you get things out correctly. So there's a lot of ways to go about it. Ultimately, I find that when I open up a new project, I typically work in this default project, because this default project is automatically set to 2, and then I stay true. What I will do is I'll actually save this out, control duplicate that, and I scale this one down. And then I start my project. Typically, that's how I'll do it. And when I do this, I'm actually staying under that 2. Now, 2 is like the golden number. That doesn't mean that if you have a size of like 25 that your scene is wrong. It's just if you're importing your scene to another DCC, you might actually notice that you're getting a much bigger file. So focus here on the sizing aspect of your scene. Dropping that back down to 2 should hopefully get you closer to what you're looking for. Hey, what's up, B? Big guy, what's happening, man? It's going good. Just another day in the office, and I love it. Will I be just demonstrating hard surface retopo with this mesh? If you are there any settings besides the ZBrush mesher that you recommend for more accurate topology? Fun little fact, Emperor of Cheese. The way I work with my hard surface modeling in ZBrush is I try to keep my mesh as clean as possible the whole time, and then I don't need a retopo. I try really hard. Now, if there is any type of live Boolean tricks, for example, like if I cut a hole, I actually have some tricks for you that I can go through to help keep your mesh really nice and clean. The thing I will go on record saying, I have no problems going on record saying this because I personally have done this a lot, and I know other artists that do the same thing, if the object itself does not get decimated, when you move into something like Unreal Engine, everything gets triangulated anyway. So if nothing is actually being decimated, deformed, if everything is not being deformed or animated in a way where it's like, just like a wrist or an elbow, if it's not an organic thing that needs deformation lines to control it, if it's like a spaceship that actually has like mechanical parts to it that might move, those mechanical parts can be independently animated for those. But everything at the end of the day, for like a game engine, for example, gets triangulated. So really, the cleaner the topology you build from the start will help you with all the other steps like texturing, UV, unwrap, etc. But then once it gets to something like Unreal Engine, it gets triangulated. So here in this aspect, when I model in ZBrush, I'm actually going through and I'm trying to keep all the edge loops as clean as possible. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that I actually, let's say here I have a mesh like this, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pop a hole in this guy, and I'm going to do a live boolean. So yeah, I got this here. I'm going to come through, scale this down, pop this up here, right? Now I'm going to cut a hole. So to get some really cool tricks for this happening is actually really paying attention to the actual topology and how clean that topology is, and how the two objects are intersecting together. So for example, what I mean by that before I show you on this one is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just come up here, make Polymesh 3D, turn this one off for a second. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to insert a sphere that has completely different geometry. I'm going to scale this up a little bit. Now, actually, I'm going to scale it down. I'm going to come over here and space like this. So now I'm going to group this in a folder. We'll call the folder blah, 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 blah. And I'm going to drag this here, and I'm going to set this one to cut. Okay, so I have something like this. Now, notice that this topology here is really low. There's almost no edge loops here on the top, except for your main shape edge loop and a point. And then I have these quads here. But then now look at these quads here. They're tight. They're tighter. It's more dense of a mesh. We have 8,000 versus 482. If I were to go ahead and try really hard to, let's live boolean this together. So I'm going to come up here and go to live boolean and boolean this folder. And I come on down. I want you to take a look at this mesh now. This is just nasty. This does not work. This mesh here, if I were to try to ZBrush this, I'm going to have a hard time, because look at all the different triangles in which it's actually trying to stitch each vertice to all of these other vertices. For this one vertice, you can see here it looks like I have maybe about 12 or 15 different edges trying to connect to the same point. So and then I'm going to go ahead and tell, I'm going to tell ZBrush, hey, do me a favor and restitch all of this for me. That's a lot of effort. So one of the tricks that I recommend doing is, instead of this, I'll come back here. I'm going to click on this guy. Okay, so now I have this. What I'm going to do is actually something in this case, if I can, I want this to be a lot cleaner. I'm going to go to polygroups. Let's sort this out. I'm going to go group by normals, and I'm just going to quickly increase. I'm going to increase those polygroups. Now I'm going to subdivide up a few times. So now I have something that's a lot similar. I'm going to delete lower, and I have a lot similar of topology between this mesh and this mesh. They look very similar to each other. So now if I were to go through and turn solo off, come back on, and now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to boolean this folder. Now I have this topology. Now this topology, at least around here on this edge, will give me a nicer time. So when I want to ZBrush something that has been live booleaned like this, now I can come through and say this actually might give me better results. So I'm going to go to ZBrusher. Again, this actually is this model is symmetrical, which helps us in our favor in this demonstration. But if this was off over in space, I would make sure symmetry is turned off, and then I would actually up this. This is 10,000 active points, so I'd actually from 5 maybe go to 10, or maybe click same. I would keep it around the same. Keep groups. I'm going to go ahead and turn smooth groups down, and then adaptive size down to 0. And when I go ahead and ZBrush this, now I have a lot cleaner of topology that just got pushed all the way through. That doesn't mean that you couldn't do it on this mesh, which we could go ahead and try, but notice that this point on this mesh is 3,000, and and the starting on this one was 10,000. And I actually doubled that topology, almost doubled it. And now I can actually come through and say, let's go half, maybe retry this a couple times. And I'm getting a lower, cleaner topology, and I can work with this. This is something I can work with, no problem. I can even hide this mesh here, so clicking this point, maybe coming through and doing like a relax smooth if I wanted to. I can actually work with this, or I could step back and say this was a lot better. Or I can even focus on the edge loop control. So let's say there's a pole here that I'm not really loving. I can actually come here with ZBrush guides, and I can say, look, I really need you to pay attention to this part here, and maybe give me some straight lines here. I'm going to go ahead and say same. I'm going to retry this, and it moved that pole on over to this side just a little bit more. It actually helped me a little bit get that nicer, cleaner result. So when I subdivide here, it's giving me something that looks a little bit easier to work with. So, and there's a nice point here too. That's a nice sharp edge that I can focus on. Yeah, absolutely. Doot. What's up, Casey? Yeah, I do need to hydrate. Thanks, man. Been talking this whole time. Yep, absolutely. So, yeah, anytime you guys do any type of live boolean whatsoever, subdivide your mesh up a little bit, give it a little TLC, then do the live boolean, then ZBrush it. You're going to go ahead and get much cleaner results. And I will say that I would be able to work with this mesh if I were to actually delete my hires and just do a quick dynamic subdivision. I can work with this. And then two, now I have polygroups, right? So I have polygroups. So what I can do is I can utilize some of these groups. I can even go with ZModeler and check this out. With the polygroups, I can go crease. I can crease by my polygroups now. And then on top of it, let's say I want a seam right here because I actually want to unwrap this bad boy. So I'm going to go through here and I can, I'm going to go in the back like this. I'm going to find that middle one. I'm going to go with the point with crease and shortest path. I'm going to click this point here. I'm going to come on down. I'm going to click this point here so I could draw this whole seam out this way, right? Just like that. To that point to that point. And now what we did add in 2023, this is that if we go to UV map, creased edge. Yep, it is symmetrical. I could keep that, or I can unwrap. I can unwrap this based on my creased edges now. And now if I were to go ahead and bump off and go to my UV wrap, I actually have some decent UVs I can utilize. And I can come back here, and I can move forward, and I can keep that if I want. It's completely up to us. So those are ways you can go about utilizing all of that functionality. Yo, what's up, Andrew? What is happening? Okay, cool. Have to go back over the work after tonight. Lots of great info. Thank you. You're absolutely welcome. Okay, great. Just want to make sure. Okay, cool. All right, let's move on forward. It's 11 o'clock, and I at least want to be able to have built the bulk of this lightsaber so that May the 4th's coming, and somebody may want to do a lightsaber build. So let's actually move on to the next step. So I have the array mesh here, and again, so same thing. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to duplicate this guy. Great questions, by the way, guys. Really love the questions that you guys are flying at me. Okay, so now check this out. I'm actually going to come here. I'm going to clip curve this section right here, and then having this pretty much sized the way I want it. That's almost the way I want it. It's almost the way. Okay, I'm going to come through here and actually drag that, say something like such. Ish. We could go a little bit longer. Okay, great. It's more of reference, not have to. Perfect. Okay, great. So now I'm going to come through here and we're going to start cutting in some of these shapes here. So actually what I could do, because I do have reference here, I could easily come through and actually do a really cool trick that I like to do, which is instead of coming to my edge and then saying insert single and then trying to come through and hand draw out this one and then come here and do this one. That could be a little bit of a pain. Instead, what I would like to do is actually come through and I'm going to mask the whole thing off. And then with Slice Curve will actually add in edge loops completely without adding polygroups. So like notice here, if I do this, it's gonna slice, and I don't want those polygroups. I just want to be able to have a few edge loops. So I'm gonna actually come through here and do a couple custom edge loops right where I want it to be. Say something like that. And again, yep, that's perfect. Now I'm gonna mask this section off, actually lift this up a little bit. Okay. And then I could come in here with this polygroup, tap this, get this something that's a little bit different. Come here, Q mesh. Now I'm going to push this in just a little bit. I'm going to tap a couple times just to give me a couple edge loops because I'm going to have some custom beveling there. Beautiful. And then I'm going to go here down at the bottom. And again, I'm going to hover here, going to tap this, give me a different edge loop. I'm going to go to inset. So you can see here, it's a very rinse and repeat process. But as you can see, I'm actually able to come in here and quickly create something like this. And again, now I actually want to have a couple custom edge loops here to create another little divot. So I'm actually going to not mask the whole thing off. Slice curve, and I want one right here, and I want one right here. And then I'm going to come here. Again, polygroup is selected. Make a new polygroup. Q mesh is selected. And tap that in. So we get something like that. Beautiful. And now we could actually come through just to make matters fun. Group by normals just to make sure that we have everything that we want. And then again, so again, I'm trying to keep it really, really clean as I'm coming through and actually utilizing a lot of the topology. And then how I did these little guys down here was with array mesh as well. But first I actually want to create a little nubbin. So I'm going to come in here, inset this, say something like this. Actually make sure I get a different poly group. There we go. Q mesh. Drag this out. Say something like that. Then I just masked this off and I actually set this into the center. And then I just scaled this down and repositioned it however I wanted it. And then I do crease by polygroups. So I can do a dynamic subdivision and get something really smooth. How come after using Drop 3D a few times, my viewport render now makes my Mac gray look very flat? It's possible that when you're using Drop 3D that maybe you applied a material to it as well. So here, let's actually, I'm going to turn live boolean off, and then let me see if I can actually replicate that. Might be just a couple things to look at, but yeah, if I were to take this, go to document, and go to Drop 3D, which is a new feature for those of you who don't know. At the very top here, I did not have materials or RGB actually selected, and yet it auto selects because we're moving into a 2.5D tool. So I would first want to make sure that you turn that stuff off. And then what I also recommend is that you come over here to your simple brush and drag something like single layer brush. And again, just make sure your RGB is turned off. And then from there, you can actually come through and maybe create like, let's say maybe something like a line. Cool, just dragging that out, say beautiful. And then the other thing to look at, let's dock this over here, is that the sub-pixel size, the lower the number, the more dense it's gonna be, and optimization is more, think of it more like it's decimating after the fact. So I would start at like maybe 2 and then pick it back up. And then you have something like this. If I take a look at that mesh. But if I had a material turned on, like if I actually back this up, and then I say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and drop this again. And then I had, let's say, just for instance, maybe I accidentally had flat color, or I had something like skin shade. And then I did mRGB, and I'm dragging this out. Starfish, there we go, perfect. Pick it back up. This is now it's now picking up that color and that material in that spot there. And you can see here, there wasn't enough information to capture that color. So I would say try that first. But if it's different than what you're seeing on my screen, I'd say it's okay to throw in a trouble ticket. just because there might be something else going on. But I would say start there first. Just double check and make sure that stuff's not turned on. I would love to play Iron Maiden, but there are royalty laws that I have to abide by. So I always have like some sort of instrumental fun stuff. But if I could, I would. Believe you me. Oh, also your 3D brushes don't work out as well. Okay, so you're going to be working in, when you go to drop 3D, you're moving back into the foundation of ZBrush, which is a 2.5D program. So ultimately, if you want to use 3D assets, here's how you actually go about doing that. So I'm going to come down here to the tools and notice here how I have like now a new layer, single layer brush. That's a 2.5D brush, right? And it's actually, if I click that in 3D mode, it's going to say, hey, you can't use that brush here. You got to switch out. I'm going to hit escape. So if I wanted, like, let's say an asset, for example, let's say I really wanted this mesh to be on my 2.5D or my drop 3D function, what I can do is actually from here, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and copy this, right? Or I can come up here and actually clone that. So now I have this part here. And now I'm going to go ahead and look at it this way. And then I'm going to go back to my actual saber. And let's say I want to add that new material, that new mesh in drop 3D. So, okay, we're going to go to document. We're going to go to drop 3D. Now I actually, instead of clicking a brush, I click that shape. Now that shape overwrites all brushes. And so with the stroke drag, right, I can actually drag that shape out. But now notice here what's happening. It's actually taking that mesh and it's dragging it out from the center pivot point of where it resides in the actual mesh. So this is actually, the pivot point is the center of the actual viewport. So instead of doing that, I'm going to go ahead and pick this back up. Okay, I want to make sure that when I grab this, I'm going to send this to the home position, and I can even set it to how I want to face it. So I want this facing the actual face that's here. So now when I come back and I go, okay, let's go drop that again. I now click that mesh. I come back here, drag that mesh, and now I can drag this out. I now can hit W, okay, and I can even press and hold Alt and drag that in, which cuts it, or I can press and hold Control, which will actually push that further into the mesh or pick that back up. I can even hit R for rotate this around, right? Kind of recenter that the way I think it makes sense. I can even hit W and then move that wherever I would like. Again, repositioning this the whole time. And then when I'm ready for this now, so again, pressing W and actually dragging this in just a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and hit draw again. Now I'm going to go ahead and pick that back up. And it should go through. Now, why didn't it do that? Did not do it this time. Let me redo that. Face, drag this out. Come back, drop, pick it up. Okay, am I on the wrong tool? I'm on the wrong subtool, guys. Ian's on the wrong subtool. Look at that. Congratulations, Ian. You just did not do it right. Okay, well, first things first, be on the proper subtool that you are. Be on the proper subtool. There's a lesson in this. Okay, so be on the proper subtool and then drop it. There we go. Now pick the mesh and we just drag that back out. That also makes sense why it was kind of offset a little bit. Come here, pick it back up. There we go. Boom. Now I have this button here, right here in the middle. See, even I make mistakes. It's still good. And I can adjust that. And look at that. That's actually adjusting that perfectly fine. And boom, there you go. So that's how you would use that mesh. So first things first, just to recap, make sure that you are on the proper subtool you want to drop. You drop it from there. You grab another mesh that you have that you really like, and then you drag that out. It's going to be on that pivot point, okay? And then from there, you're going to pick it back up, and then it will weld it to that section. So there you go. So it should be doing that. Also, what's really fun to expand on that is it's not just meshes that are here. Well, it is meshes that is here in your scene, but you can utilize an IMM brush, which you couldn't do that before. So what I mean by that is let me pick an IMM brush, say something like this spaceship, because I want to have some nice little textures, and I actually want to say this thing right here. let's do that thing right there. That's the thing that I want. I can actually come up here to brush and go to mesh. And now this is going to pull the mesh out of that IMM brush and put it in the center of my viewport as a separate tool. And now I have all of this really cool texture. Now I can come back here, make sure I'm on this one, come up here to, and then go to drop 3D. And now I come back to that, and then I have this brush right here. There you go. And again, I can resize that the way I want it, and then I can go ahead and pick that back up. And that was really far out there in space, so let me adjust that last just a little bit. So, yeah, I am human. It's happened. It's happened. You can draw it. Yay. Does ZBrush complete with Maya in terms of hard surface modeling from point A to point B? No, absolutely. Yeah, ZBrush is an industry standard sculpting program, and anything that you build with inside ZBrush, whether it be from hard surface to organic or environments, you absolutely can bring that into another DCC like Maya. In fact, that is a very typical gaming workflow that we actually have GoZ functionality straight from ZBrush into Maya. So if I had Maya installed here, which I actually think I might, I can actually re-click this. Say I have Cinema 4D, which is perfect. 3ds Studio Max, that's on there as well. I'm going to skip that for now. I don't want to. Maya was found. Boom, that's the one I want. Yeah, go ahead and install that. Boom, perfect. And then I can come through and say, yeah, Photoshop was found. Yeah, click it. Yes, yeah, go ahead and install that too. Yeah, perfect. Boom. So you're watching me literally install. Now I can pick which one do I want to go to. Cinema 4D, Studios Max, Maya, Photoshop, all of that. GoZ works in that function, so you absolutely can send your ZBrush stuff on over in that pipeline. What did I use to make the reference picture? Great question. So the reference picture that I used, actually I made this lightsaber ahead of time. I actually made this lightsaber a little while ago, and I wanted to make another one. So I actually came over here and I drug this up and then I hit Shift S, which stamps it to the screen. And then while I'm modeling, I can actually come through here and then I can match that up perfectly fine. So it's you can also do a texture. So let's say I do my infamous, and most of us do this as well, I'm sure. I'm going to go ahead and drag this out, and let's just call this Luke's lightsaber, right? Boom. So I find Luke's lightsaber as the reference. They're going to go ahead and perfect. Let's just drag one. All right, there you go. Let's grab that one. Go ahead and just go ahead and save that image, right? I'm going to put this on my desktop, and that's saving me out a nice JPEG. Now I want to bring that image in. So another way you can bring in reference, one of two ways you can do it. You can either come through here and actually go to Subtool. This is an older way of doing it. Insert a plane 3D. Say something like this, and then I can actually insert this as a texture map. So I come through here, say import, go to my desktop where I saved it. Is that where I saved it? Where did I save it? Where's that in my downloads? Where did you save it, Ian? It's a good question. Well, where did I save it? Where did I save that? Go save as. Oh, okay. Saved it in another one of my projects, not in my lightsaber project. And another project coming up soon, guys. Another project coming up soon. Look at that. Possible Mandalorian helmet. Boom. Now I have this as a texture. I'm going to go ahead. And there is my lightsaber on my texture. And I can do it this way. Or, turn that off for a second. I just come up here. The easiest way, the way most people actually really learned how to do it, is import a texture. There it is. Say something like this. And I'm going to add this to Spotlight. And now I have on my Spotlight menu. So I'm actually going to scale this up, and then I'll move this over, and I'll even rotate this around. Say something like this. Okay, and then I can go ahead and hit Z. And then from there, Shift Z will hide it. Shift Z will open it up. Z will bring up the Spotlight. And then I believe, I haven't done this in a couple days, but if I actually choose, is it Paint or it's Intensity? I think it's Intensity. No, it's Paint. Paint. Yeah, nope, not that way. Contrast? Yeah, no, not that way. As Ian fumbles around and does it all. Yay. There it is. If my image is clean enough, I can actually press and hold Control and kind of drag on a color and hide a good chunk of that color, say something like that, and then I can actually have that there. This is not a super clean image, but you get the point. You can actually come through, position that. You can even take the opacity down just a little bit, and then again Z, and now it's there, and now you have an image there. So a couple ways you could do that, or you can use pure ref as well. So there's a few ways to go about doing those actions. Okay, good. That's awesome, John. Perfect. All right, let's go ahead and finish this build up, or at least get the bulk of it. We have some time still, so we could do it. It's awesome. But again, great questions. Super happy to take the questions, of course. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to down here at the bottom, we actually have, let's blow that up. Let's use this reference. We have these little points here, and I want these shapes to actually perfectly go around this section. So we're going to go ahead and do insert, and then I'm going to go ahead and use a cube 3D. And then there's a couple ways that I can actually manipulate this cube to give me what I want, because this cube is perfect for, you know, having some sort of this cube is actually perfect for having some sort of like crystal making, where if I wanted to like make a crystal, this is a way that we could actually go about doing it. Maybe our lightsaber actually needs a crystal at some point in time, but you can see here, this one has a point, and we all know and love this point very well, don't we? We all do, I promise, right? So this is a way that you can actually make these shapes here really quickly, and you can have this crystal, but we're not trying to make a crystal today, but I just wanted to showcase that that is one way to make a crystal quickly. But what we want is an actual cube. So I can do this one of two ways. I can either come on down here to my initialize and then say make Q cube with 1, 1, 1, 1, and that'll take any shape, doesn't matter what it is, and it will turn it into this nice, beautiful cube. Or we can hit the gizmo, hit this little cogwheel, and say polycube it, which will give us a bigger cube, but then with these cones, I can actually come through and delete those edge loops and have the same thing. So up to you, whichever you would like to do. But the reason we're going to do the Q cube method today, and I'm actually going to go ahead and do a geometry mirror and weld, because I want a perfectly center edge loop. So modify topology, mirror and weld is going to give me that edge loop right in the middle. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to drag this straight down. And then working on the center, I'm actually going to go ahead and mask off this section and blow this up. So I get something like that. And then I'm going to squeeze this in just a little bit. And then now we're going to give us some supporting edge loops and give us a little bit of a beveling. So I'm going to grab my Z modeler brush, hover over here. And again, I'm actually going to go ahead and do inset. I'm going to tap both sides, and then that's going to give me a nice edge loop there. And I need to work in symmetry. Symmetry is important. There we go. Beautiful. And then I'm actually going to go ahead and insert a couple edge loops right there. So this is going to give me some decent beveling. Now, I don't really care about these corners here so much. So even if I were to do this, right, that's not quite what we're looking for, but I'm going to go ahead and grab a couple loops here. It's going to kind of hold that shape just a little bit better, and even in this section here and here. So I am manually just doing that, and that's going to give me a much better shape, and it's super low res. So if we wanted to increase the resolution just a little bit, we can go to our edge, insert multiple edge loops, keep polygroups, drag this up, give us just a little bit of proper topology that's going to be pretty decent. Now that's going to give me something like that. That looks really nice. What's up, Leonard? What's up, Darren? Yeah, exactly. You are so welcome, Vardas. You're so welcome. Also, some brushes leave the curve line behind. How do you get rid of it after already drawing it? Perfect question. If you have any brush, so if you have multi-curve tube, I can actually drag multiple curves out at the same time. That's probably what you're utilizing. And then if you are utilizing just a normal curve, so just say like just curve tube and you draw one out, then draw another, it gets rid of that. But to get rid of any of these, whether it be the multi-curve or the single, just tap anywhere on the mesh except for the one that has selected, because of course that will actually change the size, right? So what you do is you'll just tap anywhere on any mesh, on any subtool, and that gets rid of that curve once you're done with it. Okay. Perfect. Okay, now we want to go ahead and duplicate this around in space. So I'm going to look at it this way, like such, and this gizmo is here. Now I'm going to truly center this to that mesh. I want to make sure that that's truly centered in space, because we've manipulated that shape just a little bit. And then again, we're going to go to Array Mesh, turn that on. I'm going to click the transpose and also lock the position. Now, what we're going to do is Y-axis is up and down, Z is back and forth, right? So I'm actually going to want to rotate this on the Y-axis. So I'm going to go to Rotate. I'm going to rotate this around 360 degrees. I only have 2, so maybe I want 8 of these. Now with the gizmo, I'm going to go ahead and drag this out. I'm going to bring this up. I'm actually going to manually scale this just a little bit. Now my bottom is a little bit too long, so we can adjust that later. So I'm actually going to come on up here like such. Make sure that that's just truly embedded. You can even push that out just a little bit. Maybe manipulate this side just a bit. So again, full control over the one mesh that is truly kept in the center. That's pure symmetrical. Scale that out just a little bit. Kind of want that to match up nicely. And now I can actually click this guy here. I'm going to go ahead and mask this one and then bring it back up, so that matches a little bit more like that. Perfect. I find that with round objects like lightsabers, if they have a lot of repeating patterns that are completely, you know, like it's the same thing all the way around, really pay attention to this gizmo guy up here, because as I rotate this around, it all looks the same. So you really want to make sure you're facing the correct way when you're utilizing array mesh, so that way you don't have to worry too much about everything else. But we're going to get an identifying factor here right now. Now I need to call this the actual handle. Not Gandal, handle. Yes, and perfect. And then this guy right here is the actual, we'll call these, actually, you know what we'll call this the heat sink. This is the heat sink, because lightsabers have to get hot. They have to. I do not believe that they do not get hot. So there must be a built-in heat sink to dissipate that heat evenly, keeping the lightsaber user, or the Jedi, well, it doesn't matter. So the Sith user, whoever wielding a lightsaber, hands need to stay nice and cool. I would imagine that all the mechanics and the crystallization's down there at the bottom, but you need a heat sink in order to dissipate that heat. So that's what we're calling it. If it's not canon, I apologize to anybody who's watching this after the fact. And then this bottom part right down here, I'm just going to call these handle blade points. Handle points. Boop. Oh geez, a lightsaber hard surface in ZBrush. This will be on YouTube after it's finished. Absolutely. Or it'll be a stream and then pulled off. No. Phantom Menace. Awesome name, by the way. Perfect stream for you to be in. I am finishing the bulk design here, and it will be back up. No problem. The stream always lives, and so I will even make sure to, like, we're going to chapter it so that you can just make sure you see all the points, because I've answered a bunch of questions. But it will be up, so do not worry. You'll be able to build your own. And please, if you're watching this and you build one, please tag me in it. I would love to see it. You can tag me at Iris Sculpts. You can also tag Maxon ZBrush. You can just tag ZBrush. Just tag all of us. Tag all the ZBrush stuff. Okay, great. Now we need the switch, the final switch. And if we come back here to this one, you can see here I got this switch. There it is. It's super beautiful. Right? There it is. Switch. We're going to make this thing. Now I'm going to kind of stamp this, because what I did really like about this switch is that... Oh, look, I actually had proper naming on this one, emitters, and I obviously looked that up. This switch is really, really cool, but this is really simple. This is just kind of like a little Y-shaped switch here. That's it. That's the shape that we're making. I'm just going to Shift S tap that so that we could see it, and then I'll even stamp this one here like that, Shift S, and then we're going to come back here. Yes, beautiful, right? Okay, now we're going to come through and actually make that switch. I'm going to make sure the switch is perfectly in front, just like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and say insert, and again, we're going to do the fun stuff. We're going to do our initialize, and then we're going to go Q cube, just like that. Turn that to its side, make sure that it's facing front and center, and bring that down. Perfect. Now I'm going to do the same thing, which is mirror and weld. That's going to give me a nice center edge loop right down the middle. Now I'm going to expand upon this, just like such. Stretch this out. And again, just put this kind of somewhere in there like that. I'm going to even drop that down just a little bit so we can see the full design. All right, now let's go ahead. Now we know what direction we're facing. We got to make these little steps. So we're actually going to go ahead and utilize a couple just simple tools, nothing crazy. I'm going to come through here with ZModeler, insert multiple edge loops. I'm going to drag out just the one right there. And then I will utilize a single edge loop here, something like this. And actually, let's do this one here. Yeah, let's do that. So now what I did, I just alt-tapped that edge loop to get rid of it because I want it to be a little bit further. So now what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to use Q mesh. So I'm going to alt-tap, give me a temporary polygroup. Q mesh on the face. I'm just going to drag that down. That deletes that. Not delete it. It actually snaps it back down to the bottom, which gives me this point here. And now I'm going to alt-tap this side. Q mesh this out just a little bit. Right? Let's actually drag that out just a little bit further. Say something like that. Now I'm going to alt-tap these two. I'm going to drag this out just a little bit. Alt-tap. I'm going to alt-tap that and drag that out just to get those stepping stones. So that's it. So all we did was we extruded this out, Q-meshed it, extruded it up, extrude it out. And I can actually adjust the size of this. I can actually mask this edge loop down here. I can come through, adjust the sizing. All this stuff here can be adjusted. I can even, let's add in another edge loop right here. And let's alt-tab and Q-mesh this to this guy. So this is just a little bit lower. Then I can actually mask off this section here and adjust according, giving me this a little bit better of a design. And then to control how this falls off, we'll go polygroups and group by normals. So we have this beautiful shape. Now we could absolutely come through and make these little points here as having individual, you know, as like welded to it, which is how I did it originally, but that was way more work than it was actually worth. So I'm going to actually come through, just give me some proper topology, as in like just enough to, you know, be usable. Say something like that. Perfect. That's low enough. I don't need it too crazy. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use IMM brush, and I'm just going to use a simple IMM primitives with a Q cube. I'm going to drag out this shape. Okay. And now I'm going to go ahead, and these are going to be independent. So I'm actually going to come through here. And I'm actually going to make this its own polygroup by masking it off, making sure that it's masked off and not the other thing. And then Control W or Command W. Now I'm going to bring this back. And I'm going to embed this into the actual object. Now I've been showing the array mesh, which that's not going to really work here in this case. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to do a control drag. I'm going to utilize the edge loops as a point in which I'll keep everything even. So while my gizmo is facing this edge loop here, I know it's lined up fairly well. I'm going to hold control, drag out to the second, so that way I know it's lined up evenly. Let go of control, drag this out. It's going to give me something like that. Now I can just mask this section off, repeat this, and then maybe set this in the center. And then I can actually come through and readjust that so it's as even as possible. A little bit of a manual change there. There we go. And let's actually do ourselves a favor. I'm actually going to select the color that is in the stamp by hitting just C. I'm going to actually come up here to fill this color, because the other one is not actually because the other one's masked off, it didn't take that color, but those are also separate polygroups. So now let's come through and actually start kind of colorizing this just a little bit. So I'm actually going to come through here. I'm going to choose just the basic white. I'm going to start making some different color choices because visually that's going to look better. So I'm going to come through, hit color, fill. Now I'm going to come back over here, control. I'm going to grab this one. Nope, sorry, this one. That's the copper piece. There we go. This one's the copper piece. Make sure it's not masked off. Fill that. Perfect. Now this one, I'm actually just going to make this all black, or at least the darker colors. I'm just going to say fill. I know this top part here is actually a white color, so we can actually come through and give it some edge loops and vertices because we're poly painting. And poly painting is going to essentially allow us to, that's where the poly paint is captured, is within the vertices itself. So if I want to make sure that it's actually a decent paint job and not too crazy, I'm going to just come through here, give me some different edge loops, say something like that. Great. Then I'm going to now gonna get that poly group and that one, and then I'll paint this one white. Control, fill that one. That way that one is black and the other one is white. Perfect. And that will do that. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to tap here. I'll check chat in a second. So again, because this is array mesh, I can actually come through here and turn these off for a second. Just turn array mesh off. Come through and actually give me some nice edges. Say something like this, say something like this, and then just something like that, right? And now I'm actually going to pick this one. This one is going to be the white color. So I'm actually just going to hide that one, and these will actually be the darker color. So I'm going to go ahead and say fill. Let's actually make sure it's the same color. So I'm going to see over there. That just picks. Now I have this. If I turn array mesh back on, boom, all my color transfers with it. So it transfers color as well. And then I'm going to come through, tap this one, and the same thing, color fill. And we're mostly done with the overall build. I talked forever, so you know that's always going to affect how fast or slow we move something. Let's make sure I didn't miss any questions. Yes, Larry, absolutely. This will be on after the fact. Yeah, right. He's here, hanging out. What's up, Kairos? How you doing? I like how you can come here and see how it's done, and then they'll help you if you ask questions. This guy's helped me a few times. Absolutely, Violet. That's what, honestly, that's what I love to do. That's why I'm here. And I just, honestly, I just love it so much. So, what's up, Leonard? Yeah, dude, if I didn't answer that question, Leonard, I'm doing good, man. Doing good. Lots of really fun stuff. Okay, let's actually come through, and let's look at my original lightsaber build, or at least check out our reference. So we have a reference here. Okay, so this switch is actually a lot bigger than I made it. I made the switch pretty small. Yay, small is not what we want. So this is why, too, I come here and I make, when I'm making stuff, I section all of my assets out, especially when I'm hard surfacing, because I want to be able to make changes. If I were to weld this to this here and then it was wrong, then right, I got to rebuild everything. That's way more work than it's worth. So here, I'll call this the switch, not the Nintendo one. I'm going to set this up in the center, and now I can actually scale this up, blow this up a little bit more, move that down, make it more appropriate, right? And even set that up just a little bit more like that. There we go. So that's a little bit more accurate to size. And same thing, but like let's say if I wanted to weld something to it, for example, let's say I wanted to weld a button, like I wanted to model a button within it or something that looks like a button, then I absolutely can come through and do Z modeler, maybe have this shape here, and then I could select like maybe these points here, and then maybe these points here, right? Actually, I don't want that one here, so I want 3 and 3. So maybe that's what I want to do. Then how did I not have? I did not. Okay, got to turn symmetry on, Ian. So I'm actually going to go, give me some space, 1, 2, 3, skip a space, 1, 2, 3. That should be better. And now I'm going to actually come in through here. I'm going to do inset. And then I'm actually going to Q mesh this down a little bit. Say something like this. Okay, I'm going to inset this one more time, a little bit bigger. And now I'm going to come through here. Now I'm going to Q mesh this up. Now I'm going to do this a lot. I'm going to do something like this, because now I actually want this to be scaled in just a little bit like such, and then drop that back down. So then this would actually give me kind of like a little bit of a shadow effect, so it looks like that button. And then I would actually color that a little bit more. And then here, what I would do is maybe come through and do group by normals. Say group by normals, so polygroups. I was hovering right over it. Group by normals, right? And then I would say go ahead and crease those polygroups. Say something like that. But now this edge here is actually going to collapse a bit. So I'm going to hover over that edge, and I'm going to go crease, complete loop. No, I'm sorry, partial loop, not complete loop. Partial edge loop. I'm going to do these edges here and here. And here and here. That's going to find all the way to that intersection point. And then I'm actually going to just do edge here, 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 here. Just kind of come through and come through this section like that. Just kind of give it a manual touch. Come through here, maybe here, here. I could even do shortest path, crease shortest path, right click that edge loop, click that edge loop, a little bit faster, right? Shortest path, that works. So then now I'm getting this kind of a little bit of a collapsation here. So again, I can actually crease this edge here and here. So partial, boom, 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 and boom. So now that edge is not collapsing, and that looks nice and sharp because I just went ahead and creased those areas. And that'll be good because then when I go ahead and I subdivide up a little bit just to give it some more control points, it'll actually be super helpful. So those are ways you can actually make something and kind of weld it in. I rarely do it that way if there's function to that button, but that's a way you can go about doing that as well. So just nice little tips. And now the last piece for the stream itself will be those triangles. The triangles. We're going to show you how to make a triangle like that. Yes, absolutely. Will be replay. Can we array and project model on any surface of any other model? So you can array mesh any model, and for projecting, yeah, you can project from one model to another. You can either do project straight, or you can actually do, so you could actually do like from one switch to another. The thing with projecting is that you want to make sure that the space in which you're projecting onto, like typically you know, if you have a high res and you're trying to to project to a low mesh, again, you know, if the same geometry, lower version of it basically supports the same space, it'll project to that space. And you could do that with different ways. So for example, if I have this sphere over here, say something like this, and I have another sphere, okay? What I could do is I actually could, if I sculpt on this one, say something like this. Whoa, 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 what you doing, buddy? Okay, I'm going to actually come through here, and let's just, yeah, let's solo it out. Perfect. So let me actually sculpt on this guy here. Is it masked off? What's happening here? What is happening in here? Let's go through here. Perfect. Oh, you know what's happening? I forgot to mention, when I have my my texture for projecting this guy right here, right? I forgot to tell you one little thing. If you have your reference via texture, go up to your brush, go up to your, I believe, samples and spotlight projection. If your brushes don't work when you have a texture up like that, that's actually why. Okay, so I have my sculpted version here. Okay, this is on another subtool, something like this, right? So if I wanted to project this to this shape here, if I go ahead and click like maybe a point in history, or maybe not a point in history, maybe I just come down here, I have everything else hidden. These two are in folders, or I have this one parented to that one, but these are parented to there, because that's how projection can work. It's going to take a look at the parenting system, which is a little arrow next to that start function. This little arrow right here will parent to the ones below it, and then if you have another one, see that's at 4, this one below it, that's now parenting down there. That's how you can control that, or you can just put it all in the folder, which I typically do now. So kind of, for me, I don't do the parenting as much, but that's the way you can do it. So if I want to project this to this, right now, notice that they are stacked on top of each other, right? This one is here, and this one is down here. Well, if I want to project from this to this one, I first select this one, I come on down here to project, and I can just say project all, right? Except for nothing happens, because it's looking at projection in the same space. If I were to put this one back in the center, right here, and I'm going to hide it, right? Or instead of hiding it, actually what I should do, because you shouldn't hide it, is to solo it, and I say project all. Notice now it's starting to do that projection, right? But there's not enough information to support all that stuff. So another way that you could do it, which I tend to do a lot more these days, now this is also a pretty harsh projection, is that, so let's actually come back here and let's soften this up a little bit. Just a bit. Okay. What I like to do too is do history projection. So I can history projection from one tool to another. Notice that there is a red bar up here. So if I had this one here and I subdivide up a couple times, so I have some geometry to support that, and this red bar, and I know this red bar is tied to another subtool that has changes, geometrical changes to it, or even polypaint changes to it, right? And I store that history for those changes, and I come here and I do a projection. I say project history. Now it's going to try to do it. It's a good projection job. But of course, too, that's only you're going to be limited by the amount of vertices, and of course, if the geometry changes. Because this is a sphere and this is no longer a sphere, this is actually has bumps to it. This point in space right here, this lives outside of this capture point. So I'd actually need this to be a little bit more in space, because that's how it's going to work. If I were to smooth this back down and then come through and say this actually needs to be something like that, and then do that project history, now it's going to try to capture that information. So you can absolutely do it, but as you can see, I would be cautious with doing it that way. It's much easier to project it to itself, in my opinion, but it can be done, yes. And I've done it a few times knowing what that one subtool for the other one is. So hopefully that explains it a little bit. Perfect. You like lightsabers? Who doesn't? Getting inspired to make a lightsaber design for my character. Perfect. Yeah. But now, if you go back also to just on the array mesh design with Manish, if you go back to this video, I actually showed array mesh quite a lot. So, and I did this with array mesh, and I also did this guy with array mesh. So definitely easy ways to go about doing that. Hi, Supremacy. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and get ourselves a triangle before the stream wraps up. So what's going on? Hey, Daisuke, what is happening? Everybody say hi to Daisuke. Daisuke does a lot of amazing works behind the scenes, and if you don't know who he is, stop what you're doing. Say hi to Daisuke, because he is amazing. Okay, just a little bit of changes. Okay, cool. Now we're going to go ahead and do the triangle little bits for this lightsaber, because Luke's lightsaber has little triangle bits on it. And those triangle bits are like, I believe they're buttons, like up and down. I don't know what they do. I just like the design. So what we're going to do now is actually get those things. I'm actually going to go ahead and save this. And then we're going to make that triangle. So the easiest way to make a triangle, in my opinion, easiest way, is get yourself a plane 3D. Solo this out and take a look at this plane 3D. And say to yourself, this is really cool plane 3D. How do I make this a triangle? And you're going to say, simple. Go to geometry. You're gonna reconstruct so you get something that you like. You're going to go ahead and you're going to rotate this at a 45. You're going to delete your higher. Okay? And then you're going to come through here, and you can either take slice curve, boop, and you could go ahead and delete that lower part, come through here, and you could say, you know what? Let's go to geometry, modify topology, and delete hidden. I'm going to reset this. We're going to squeeze this end on itself. Look at that. We're going to come here, Z modeler, Q mesh. You're done. You did it. Made a triangle. Very proud of you. So now we're going to come on through here, and we're going to go ahead and make sure that we do, this is the important part, polygroups, group by normals, come through. You can, yes, you absolutely can before you ask the question, because there's no wrong way to eat a Reese's. You can also do a mirror and weld so that you know it's symmetrical. So when you do symmetry, it's going to be the same. And then we're going to go ahead and do crease by polygroups. Yay, we got our creases. It's really, really fun. And now we're just going to come in here. We're going to take said triangle. I'm going to move this around this way. Say, yes, this is good. I'm actually going to send this in the center. Scale this on down. Going to move through. Now these can be our little lights. These are way better triangles, B, than the ones I made before when we were hanging out in the Discord. Remember? Remember, buddy? Remember? You were like, what the heck did you do? We're going to go ahead and control drag this on over. I'm going to rotate this around in space. I'm going to drag this over here. Clear that mask. Beautiful, something like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and modify topology, mirror and weld that. We talked about mirroring earlier. I'm going to make this top one green. So I'm going to grab the green, and then I'm also going to turn around and I'm going to make this one red. Say something like that. I'm going to color fill with RGB selected. That's important. Color fill that. I'm going to go ahead and inverse this, switch this over, hitting V and control. Boom, boom. Now we got green and red, and this is pretty much the lightsaber that I had built, and we did it. We did it in under 2 hours, which is really, really awesome. So there you go. So yes, this will be up again, like we had talked about before. Now I'm going to go ahead and give I'm going to fine tune the mesh just a little bit. I'm going to come through here, and I'm going to do some insert, and I'm going to just make sure I add some edge loops. Now notice too, when you add edge loops to something that is creased, your edge loops will pick up the crease. So I just go here to uncrease all, come through, and then I just start making some changes like such. There you go. Pick up a couple. Again, just so that my low res has some nice topology. Again, it's really important for your low res to have some nice topology, especially if you're going to move this over to, let's say, like Substance Painter for texturing, or you want to put this in a game engine at some point. If you just make sure that your low is not amazingly low, but low enough to at least support and get some proper UVs, then you're good to go. Boom, perfect. So you saw something like that. That's awesome. And then I can just come back and do the crease by polygroups if I want to have that creased. Now earlier, little tricks of the trade is that we talked about beveling these edges, and that's why here I actually added some extra edge loops. So what I can do is actually come through. The quickest way to add a bevel, there's two ways to add a bevel, and then I'll leave you with this little bit of information, is you can actually do it one or two ways. You can come through here with insert and just single edge loops, and you can like custom do some supporting edge loops and then alt deleting your edges like such, and that's going to go ahead and give you some custom bevels. So that's really cool if you got like one or two. But let's say I want to bevel every one of these polygroups because that needs to happen. I don't want to do that to every single one, so instead what I can do, I'm going to quickly save this, and I'm going to show you Bevel Pro. Now, Bevel Pro has been around for at least a couple years. I want to say, Daisuke, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Bevel Pro was introduced in 2021, so it's not too new, but it's not too old. But what we could do with Bevel Pro is and this is the key part, the caveat, you need polygroups, okay? To have polygroups is the real successor to Bevel Pro. So if I want to be able to utilize Bevel Pro and get some nice bevels overall, I can actually come up here to Z plugin with my polygroups, and then I can go to Bevel Pro. And I actually believe that this button lives under Subtool. Yep, Bevel Pro. I just saw it. There it is. Boom. And I click it. Same difference. It's there. This opens up a brand new UI. And now you can see here that I can navigate this very similar to what I was already doing. So same thing, right-clicking, navigation, same thing you're used to ZBrush. The important part here is this pink line, these red points, and these blue dots. And if we were to actually go ahead and say preview edges, what you'll see, if I zoom in here, is that the pink is actually what's being cut, and then the red points are actually with a start and end point, and then of course the blue is the center point of that. And also too, you'll notice that that's showcasing where that geometry lives. Those blue dots are calling out where that vertice lies. So from here, I can actually make some changes. I can actually increase my bevel amount by sliding this up, and that's going to update in real time, giving me bigger bevels if I choose to. I can also do a bevel smoothness if I would like. So it can make a lot of different changes. I can also reset this if I break it. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work really, really good. I can just go ahead and do a reset, and I'll set everything back to basics, which is awesome. I can even polish. I can even, between beveling and chamfering, I can pick 2 different types of bevel and chamfer, which is nice. But also what's really cool is that if I were to go ahead and say, yeah, okay, it's actually going to kick me into live Boolean. And then it's going to give me a cage based on these polygroups. Now, if I don't want the cage, okay, what I can do is actually turn on Apply Auto, and it's going to show me in real time what that's actually going to look like. And again, if I have the preview edges, I can actually control the mesh resolution and give me some nice low res or high res resolution. Now, of course, if you ever see any type of red in your scene, if I turn this off, let's see if I can just exaggerate this really, really quickly. Okay. Yeah, so if you start seeing any type of red or weirdness, you definitely want to make sure that you dial that down so that there's no weird red. But if your mesh is clean, like this is actually really clean, I can actually say, okay. What this will do is, again, it'll kick me into live Boolean, and it'll create a cage. It'll create a subtractive and an additive. The subtractive is, of course, going to be this part here, and the additive is going to be this part here, where it actually adds a bevel from this point to this point. So you can utilize that to do beveling across all the bars. And then what I would do is actually, I would put this in a folder and call this handle, and then I would come through here and I would add. So that's the other way that you could do that. However, again, if you want full control over your geometry, then, and you want to, like, you already have this really, really nice and low, and you want to manually add it, you could definitely do it the way I had mentioned, where you're just coming through here, you're just alt tapping. So just different methods, different strokes for what you're, and that works both the other way too. This is just a little slower, but it does the same. But if you have something, what makes Bevel Pro so awesome is, especially if you're trying to bevel an edge that's like on Dynamesh or any type of like triangulated mesh, anything that's maybe not super clean and ideal, Bevel Pro works on all of that as well. So there's a lot of really cool functionality for that. So everyone who maybe hasn't upgraded to 2023, Bevel Pro is still there, and it's really a really nice functional way of going through everything. So you have full control to do it however you would like to. Let's go ahead and clear that. So cool. All right. So I'm actually going to add this guy right there. Add this little one. Add this one. I'm going to do it manually, yeah, because I actually want, this mesh is actually really, really clean, and I don't want to ZBrush it. It's actually nice and clean for me. So I could actually cut my UVs on this and then move it into, say, like Substance or something. So perfect. I'm just going to go ahead and just finalize that real fast, and then we're pretty much done for the day. So I'm actually going to boop, and boop. Let's see. Hey, what is crease? Great question. So crease is actually Crease actually does exactly what you think it does. It creases an entire edge loop. So for example, this part right here, so crease will allow us to basically, instead of adding support edge loops like this and like this, so if I could turn on like dynamic right now, just so you can see the subdivision, and I were to add another point, and then I'd add another point, right? So those are supporting edge loops which help keep edges sharp or have a nice fall off. What crease does is it does it for us. So by coming over, hovering over an edge with ZModeler, choosing crease, and then crease complete, I'm just going to add a crease, and then when I turn on dynamic subdiv, notice that the smoothing is happening and it's keeping me a really nice sharp edge. There's even more control of that if I were to go to crease, and then I can actually choose crease subdivision levels based on the creasing. So I can actually say, crease that poly group, so it gives me nice and sharp, but it's at level 15, that's too much. I can actually say, you know what, let's do crease level 2. So then if I were to get off subdivision, if I subdivide once and then twice and then 3 times, once I get to level subdivision 3 or 4, it's going to start creating a fall off. And that's going to look really, really nice. So creasing is just a faster way of actually controlling edge loop fall off. And I can control it either via with a crease or with supporting edge loops. What I like to do is leave this alone at 15, create a crease, subdivide a couple times, and then that's going to give me really nice low res, delete lower. Look at that. So now I have this nice. So at this point, if I were to actually try to bake to this later, it actually gives me something that's really nice and gives me some nice edge loops. So creasing just creases an edge and keeps things nice and sharp. That's like the easiest way to explain it. Is the saber going to be printed? I've considered printing it, yes. I have considered doing that, and I might prep it for sure. We will see. Right now I'm prepping for May the 4th, so I have another project that I am going to be coming up with soon that definitely will be 3D printed. So if you guys like helmets, that's coming. Do I do UVs in ZBrush and not Maya? I do UVs wherever I can. I do them in ZBrush. I've done them in Maya. I've done them in Blender. I've done them in Cinema 4D. So wherever it's convenient for me and how fast I can get it. Right now, in the 2023 package, the easiest way to get UVs that are nice and clean is so this cylinder right here, what I could do, utilizing that crease function, so piggybacking off of that, is if I go to UV Master, right, this is the old way of doing stuff where we would have UVs. Well, check this out. With that crease function, now I have all these poly groups. I can literally say, look, you know what I'm going to do? First things first is I'm actually going to hover over an edge with my ZModeler. And I'm going to now do shortest path. I'm going to click that point. And then I'm going to zoom all the way down here. And I'm going to click that point. That's going to give me this nice crease right down the middle, right? And then I'm going to go to crease by polygroups. Okay? So now I have creasing by polygroups, and I have that nice control edge all the way down there. In fact, I don't want this one here. So I'm actually going to go ahead, hover over this part. I'm going to select edge. I'm going to alt-tap that one edge. And then I'm going to do complete loop. I'm going to partial loop maybe? Okay, fine. Okay, let's just come here to edge. Just quickly, real fast. I'm going to actually remove this one here because I want that crease there because that's round, so I would want that crease there. Everything else looks good. Okay, so now that I have this, now I can actually come here with UV. I'm going to go ahead and delete the original UVs because the UVs on the original sphere has been torn up because of our modeling. So now I'm actually going to come here with crease, and I'm going to go to crease edges, unwrap. Give that a second. Now if I turn bump down, unwrap this, done. Now if I see something like this that's going on here, like I don't like this part here, so this section in particular, so I'm actually going to grab this one, I'm going to mask everything else off. I'm going to go morph back, right? So I actually did want that crease, that edge there to be unwrapped. So I'm actually going to come through here, and I'm going to go ahead and crease this area. So it looks like that needed to be unwrapped there. So then I can come through, just delete that real fast, unwrap that, make that change. So now you can, in ZBrush, you can actually create creasing and cuts based on that. And you can actually come through and separate that out. So now I have some decent looking UVs that I can actually utilize. And again, if I want to clean this up, I'm going to morph back out. If I want to clean this up and pack this better, I'm actually going to come up here to UV Master, and I'm going to go ahead and work on clone. This is nothing new. I'm going to say flatten. Now I have this here, and I can actually create edges here that are going to be nice and straight. I can manually do that here if I wanted to. So I can actually maybe pick this one here. Let's hover over an edge, and I'm going to go ahead and actually choose this edge by mask. And I'm going to hover over my partial loop. I'm going to click that, invert that, okay? And then I'm going to use the gizmo, reset the gizmo, and then I'm actually going to go ahead and straighten that edge using the scale function. So I'm going to click this guy here, invert that, send that over here, so I can actually come through real quickly, and I can actually clean this stuff up. Say that's straighter, invert that one, that's straighter. So I can do this like this if I wanted to. Get that nice and clean. And then if I want to pack things, right, I can scale this down and actually set this over here if I wanted to. That's not going to matter. So I can manipulate by using the poly groups, cleaning this up, maybe move over this one. Maybe this one was supposed to be bigger just for whatever reason, just so you could see. Come through here, and then I can go and say unflatten. And then I just come up here to copy UVs. And then I go back to my original one, this guy here, which was, I have so many things now. This guy right here, there it is. Yep. And then I could just paste that. I can come through here and I can say paste UVs. And now those UVs will be there. Boom. So yes, you absolutely can do it in ZBrush, 100%. You don't have to necessarily leave. And now with that new ability to crease edges and cut through there and do that crease, you could do that. But because we're so clean on our modeling, the other way that you could do it is actually you could do an unwrap based on polygroups as well. And you can unwrap it this way, and then you could say flatten. And so I also chose to do it by polygroups. So there are lots of ways to go about doing that. The choice is yours. But I've done it in pretty much everything. I know, right? Yeah. And I will say, like, personally, the UV, if you want to dirty UVs really, really quickly, the auto unwrap by UV Master is one of my favorites to auto just unwrap things quickly, because I usually work with polygroups. I usually get things that look really nice and clean, so it's easy to manipulate the mesh and the geometry just by utilizing polygroups, unwrapping that sucker, and then it gives you something that's close enough if you're not really wanting to care or need to really be nitpicky on how something should be packed. So depending on how that functions, you can go ahead and do that. You can even too, if you wanted to, once you get something that you like. So I'm going to back this up just a little bit, see which one I have. Okay, I got that one right there. 2, you can even come through here. You could go to texture if you wanted to. You can actually pop up here to texture, to lightbox texture. And then if you wanted to, you can actually come here to UV master check. ZBrush ships with these things. So you can actually come through here, double click this guy, and then you can actually bring that in, and you could check your UVs in ZBrush like that. And I can live with this. For this project, I can absolutely live with that. And that's with the new crease unwrap. So you have the ability to check your UVs in ZBrush as well. Again, that lives under texture and then UV master and stuff like that. So remember, at the end of the day, there's no real wrong way to do something if the end result is exactly what you need. So whatever tool you decide to use, whether you kick it over to Cinema 4D, Maya, Blender, whatever, unwrap that way, or you're in ZBrush, you know, unwrap, these are all tools to get you to the end game, which is to create art and to be able to actually have that art be looked at and loved by others. So however you get there, that's totally up to you. But in ZBrush, this is how I would end up doing it. Very cool, guys. Very cool. Is there a good tutorial on to do this with Cinema 4D? I'm pretty sure that there is. There are a ton of free tutorials. And Darren, I don't know if you're still here, but if you have something, send it to me or share it in the chat for sure. But there are a ton of free tutorials for a lot of this stuff on Cineversity, which is if you go to maxon.net and then you go to Learn Cineversity, okay, and then you come over here. All these tutorials are super here for you. There's a bunch of Cinema 4D tutorials, getting started, the new ZBrush tutorial with Anna Carolina. So I would say check here and go through, because I'm pretty certain that there is texture tutorials here as well. But I think there's also a bunch of stuff that's on our YouTube channels as well. So yeah, I would say go through this to kind of help you with that. If you're a Maxon 1 Teams user, you can get free training on the course as well. That, boom, and just like that. I think the sentence right there is one of my favorites, working with 3. The end result is what matters. Absolutely. How you get there is a personal preference. Awesome. Yep. Wanted to set it better than that. All right, guys. That is it. Yeah. Boop, boop, boop. Okay, that's going to be it for the day, guys. Thank you guys very, very much for everything. I really love the questions and hanging out. So this will be up for us to take a look at, i.e. for you guys to take a look at and follow along again. The stream usually like bakes for 30 minutes, and then I got to go through and chapter it. Chaptering takes a little bit of time, but it will be chaptered, so you guys will be able to go through that as well. So give me a little bit of time. It will be chaptered. You can go through and have fun. But that's how you build a lightsaber in ZBrush, and hopefully you guys really enjoy it. If you want next week, if we want to talk about any type of rendering, let me know, or just message me at some point in time. Be like, hey, I would actually like to see this thing getting rendered in ZBrush, because again, this render right here was done with my previous lightsaber. That was done completely 100% in ZBrush, and I actually have a trick of how to do some nice shadows and AO within it. So if you want to see that, we can cover that next week for sure. That's it. I will talk to all of you guys later. Thank you for hanging out. And as always, happy sculpting and create art. Tag me if you do anything. Later, Gators.